Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. My goal is to not touch my hair as much today, but that feels like I've already failed and already seems extremely likely. But please know that I'm putting in the effort. So I guess a couple of things we could talk about. I posted the discussion question. It was basically one large question for this month's spell read, Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. It's a really interesting book. It's framed as basically, the relationship between these three people who find themselves interconnected. And the question that I posed was essentially, who's the worst person in this book? And obviously bearing in mind that, there is no worst person in the book. Just kind of, as you're reading, there are two sort of antagonists. Kind of. I feel like the overall antagonist is just like the system, and just like whether it's being acknowledged or not kind of determines who is filling the role of the antagonist. Yeah, there's no villain. The villain is systemic racism and privilege and affluence and economic disparity. And I think that's what's so interesting is that we do get to see inside the heads of two like completely divergent points of view. It's really interesting to see what Alex, I don't know. I had a friend who spelled their name like that and she just pronounced it Alex, so I don't know what to do with that name. But, we get to see inside her head and how drastically different it is from Amira, and it makes it all seem, if we were reading this story purely from one point of view, one character would look extremely insidious or extremely not. So just kind of really interesting to see from the perspective, it's just, I always really like when you can be inside the narrator's head and realize that what they're seeing is not the objective truth. And I think that's kind of the important thing about, prejudice and bias is that there is no such thing as an objective truth, or at least not one that we're acknowledging. We each have our own truths, which is something I kind of talked about a little bit because someone asked me this week if I think it's possible to separate the art from the artist. And I think absolutely not. It's funny because Alone with You in the Ether has just come out. I'm filming this as I have just posted that it's out. It's a weird day because I'm not really feeling in an enthusiastic mood. I don't really want to promote anything right now, even though I have lots that I probably should be promoting. But yeah, so Alone with You in the Ether has come out, and a lot of Alone with You in the Ether is sort of an exploration of art. And one of the things that I hope comes through is the fact that art is about expressing a truth, but each person has their own truth. Art is not so much about telling the truth to the world, but telling the artist's truth. And it's especially ironic that the artist in the story is by nature a liar. My dog is coming in very slowly. He's taking his time. He's looking at me very intently, and he's dismissed me. He's done with me. Okay, so yeah, this idea that like an artist is they're not one piece of work, they're their body of work. And because the artist is always evolving and the amount that they produce is usually also increasing and therefore evolving, it's expressing this like their own personal view of the world. So in a lot of ways, Alone with You in the Ether is me telling you what I think it means to exist in the world. And the reason that I bring this up is because it's very interesting, this idea that, most people, applying this now to sociology, most people kind of treat racism as if it's a dirty word because being racist is objectively bad, and most people don't view themselves as objectively bad. Kelly obviously doesn't see himself as a bad person. Alex doesn't see herself as a bad person. I think they want to believe they're good people based on the fact that they can acknowledge that certain things are definitely wrong. And then, it's that kind of gray area which is why I wanted to bring up the question, like, who is the worst person here? Because at what point is there a gradation of good and bad? And at what point are things just harmful all across the board? So yeah, things to think about. So I've gotten a couple of questions recently from people who are struggling a little bit, either in quarantine or with the aftermath of quarantine. I mean, I am still definitely sheltering at home. This virus has not actually gone away, so I'm not out here, trying to get sick. Actually, okay, so when this whole first thing started, I did, I opened the floor to petty grievances, right? And we're still definitely open to that, but I can definitely feel from the interactions I've had with some of you that the attitude has gone from petty grievances to, oh my God, like these grievances are taking over my mental health. So if you have any petty grievances, go ahead and share them. But also, if you're seriously starting to feel like something is wrong, you're not alone, and a lot of this is in your head. And don't take this personally, because I'm bipolar, so almost everything that happens to me is inside my head, and that's just the way it is. But a lot of this applies to, okay, these questions were basically, someone asked about what workouts I am doing in quarantine, which is something that I've answered before. But what stuck out to me was that I just feel so bloated and I want to cut the fat out of my body. This is a very common feeling. And yes, this might have something to do with your exercise, but I think the root of this problem is we're surrounded by this uncertainty. We're isolated on our own. We're not able to get the support from, the social structures we have. We're just not able to get them. Our priorities are different. And the way you're viewing yourself is probably more the problem than how much you're actually exercising. So when I answered this ask on Tumblr, I did give some exercise ideas if that's what you're really looking for. But I also just wanted to start with the idea that you have to approach this as if half the problem is in your head. And that the way you're seeing yourself right now is, it's not an objective truth. This is basically the theme of the video, incidentally, is going to be the truth and which truths are subjective. And this is a subjective truth. The way you're feeling about yourself right now has to do more with your mindset than what you actually physically look like. So one of the most important things right now is you have to build good habits, but some of those are good mental habits, like recognizing the fact that this is not true. The way you are perceiving yourself right now is flawed. And that doesn't mean that you have to tell yourself, oh my God, I'm beautiful and everything's fine, because I know I would never believe that if I told myself that. What I do have to tell myself is this will pass. It's kind of the asking myself, am I doing as much as I possibly can to make myself feel good? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating as healthy as I can? Am I drinking water? Am I really paying attention to my physical needs? And then once that answer is yes, you have to realize that everything left over is just a psychological, emotional problem, and dealing with that it's probably about something else. So this might be about your feelings of uncertainty. It might be about the fact that you don't know what the future is going to look like. And finding the root of the problem and talking to someone about that is probably something you need to do in addition to whatever exercise you're doing. Similarly, I got an ask that was, during quarantine, I spiraled down the, did I just waste 3 years of studying for a degree I don't even like or probably won't get hired? I don't know, I'm just lost, and being stuck at home got my mind thinking of everything wrong with what I'm doing. I've never been through this, but I'm just constantly anxious of what I'm going to do next. It's hard not to compare myself to my colleagues and classmates when they're doing so well and I'm just eh. So, and I answered this person by saying that actually a lot of what I said in last week's video is about, learning to roll with these transitions, and especially not comparing yourself to others, because it's a pointless endeavor. Once again, your truth is not the objective truth. There is no objective correct path to life. Life is not a train that you miss. I guess I'm just going to keep saying this until either we've all memorized it or we're all gone. We've all found better things to do. But yes, so this is basically the same problem where you're trapped in your head right now. And I know that it sucks that you can't sort of venture outside your own little bubble of insecurity and doubt. But the thing is that you're going to face these kinds of insecurity and doubts forever. They don't go away. They don't stop happening. This anxiety about, am I doing the right thing? That's a chronic condition. That is the condition of being human. And you have to deal with it as if it is a chronic pain. And you just have to treat it, you'll never fully get rid of it. It will never completely go away. What has to change is the way that you face those doubts and the way that you view yourself and the way you stop and ask yourself, are these thoughts that I'm having helpful to me? Are they destructive to me? Are they harmful to me? And then kind of walking that back and thinking, if this were someone else, and this is something I talked about last week as well, if this were someone else, if it were someone that I cared about, someone that I loved, would I be saying these things? Would I be treating a friend like this if they had come to me with these concerns? And if I wouldn't treat them like that, why would I treat myself like this? So basically, this is my request to those of you who may or may not be losing your minds also, to just kind of take a step back today and ask, how much of this is in my head? And if it's in your head, that doesn't mean that you don't move forward with treating it. The way that you treat that is really, it's probably communication, but also to identify, what am I really worried about? What really scares me? And then as for how you deal with that fear, it's really back to that idea of you just have to focus on the things that you can actually control, which are the way you look at things, your attitude with how you deal with uncertainty, and also what is the next thing that I can do? Back to Frozen. What's the next right thing? So with the exercise question, am I exercising enough? Am I doing as much as I can? And then once I've hit this bar of I'm doing the most that I possibly can to take care of myself, everything beyond that is like, that's the metaphysical questions of existence. And also same with the second asker who feels lost in their career. Can you change? Can you change your mind? Probably yes. If it takes a little bit longer to graduate, can you handle that? Do you have a plan for that? You probably can figure something out for that. Think about what's within your control and only worry about what you can control. If you do end up graduating with this degree and you're not sure if you're going to like it or if it's going to last forever, it does not have to last forever. This is just something you have to do for a while. You can always go back to school. You can always use your education to do something different. Just because your major is for one specific thing doesn't mean you can't apply it to something else. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed by this wave of, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what to do next. You have to break it down into smaller pieces, bite-sized pieces. If you're unhappy with the way your life looks now, what could you conceivably change to be happier about it? What would make you feel better about moving forward? Not what will solve the problem, but what could make you feel better in this moment? And then once you've done that, what can make you feel better after that? Take things step by step. I have a lot of writing questions also. So one person said, I've been following your work for quite some time now, thank you. I was wondering if you had any advice for those starting out. I'm currently a uni student in Australia, and I would like to start having original work published, short stories and but I have no idea where to start. Do I research publications that might accept my work? I'm at a loss and would love to hear your point of view. Okay, so I don't have a huge amount of experience with submitting short stories. And because you're a university student, I do recommend that you talk to your university's English department because they probably have, go-to resources. There's lots of university publications that are specifically looking for work from college students. Even if it's not your major, that's fine. You're still a student there and they're still there to help you. So that's definitely going to be the first place I would point you because they probably have better resources than I do. But I definitely think that the biggest piece of advice, it's kind of the same for whether you want an agent or you want to work at a certain place or you want to publish with a certain publication. You have to know what kind of work they typically put out. So you might want to start by, you look up what sorts of publications accept, unsolicited submissions, which means people who just they open their submissions and are like, okay, submit whatever. Some literary journals do have a reading submission fee. So if you're just getting started, you maybe don't want to pile on those fees and you might want to apply places that don't have fees. Just bear in mind that some of them will charge money in order to read your story. And the likelihood of getting something published can be quite low, so just bear these things in mind. You wouldn't want to start by submitting to the New Yorker. That's just don't do that. So you might want to subscribe to some of these literary journals, the ones you think you might want to write for. You might want to read what kind of stories they typically publish. Oh, I have coffee. Excellent. And like I said, it's the same concept as, when you're trying to get a job, you want to see what sort of work they've been doing in the last year or whatever. Same with an agent. If you're looking for a literary agent, you want to find someone who typically works with the genre that you want to keep writing. People are much more likely to be receptive to you if they feel that you are actually someone who cares about the work that they do It's just kind of a general rule. So yes, there's tons of places on the internet where you can search and say what literary journals are out there that I could submit to. You might want to search specifically by genre, because most, I'm calling them literary journals because most like journals produce, they don't do genre stuff, which would be like science fiction, horror, mystery. Those, you'd have to search for those specifically if that's the kind of stuff you want to write. I always knew I wanted, well, not always, but I am not a big short story reader, which is why I didn't submit a lot of short stories. I find it tiresome to read through. Like, I'm not that interested in like the New Yorker, for example. So for me, I prefer to read books, which is why I focus most of my attention on getting books published. However, if you want to get an MFA or if you want to move forward with a literary career, then you probably do want to start reading short stories. And then, yeah, I would definitely say read short stories like the kind that you would want to write, and then pick out the kind of journals you want to write for, and then see how that goes. I know that it seems like the natural course of things should be, oh, I wrote this short story and I think it's good and I'll just submit it somewhere and that should be easy. But I do think that you probably want to target either you've already written something and you want to target the correct journal who like is more likely to publish things like that. They all have a brand, you know, and you want to make sure that you're not just submitting something that would be off-brand to them. Like they would read it and be like, this isn't really what we do. Identify the brand of your story, find the journal that matches that brand. Or do the reverse. Find the kind of thing you would want to write, and then write a story that, obviously you don't want to copy anything, but something that feels like, oh yeah, this is a theme that they often work with, or this is like, yeah, mostly it's themes. Themes are usually what I would say is like the literary brand. Theme and maybe atmosphere. You know, there are some presses that do specifically like slightly creepy things or things that leave you with like a question of like, what did that just mean? So yeah, but I can try and find some links for you, but definitely start with your university, your English department, because you probably want to make connections there anyway. They are much more connected than I am, so start there. I was hoping to get some words of wisdom from you in terms of writing a relationship that spans years since you wrote The Commoner's Guide to Bedding a Royal. Is there anything specific that you need to take note of or always remember as you write them? So I actually don't think I could have written Commoner's Guide if I hadn't written Alone with You in the Ether first. Not even just Alone with You in the Ether, but like writing a committed relationship. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it if I had not been in a committed relationship myself. I think it's just, the thing about committed relationships is there's a trust and this sort of, you don't have the same anxieties that you used to have in the beginning of the relationship. Who am I inside this relationship, and who is this other person, and is there some chance that they'll leave? And there's sort of a lot more this sense that you're kind of on uneven ground. And I think that the reason most romances are about the beginning of the relationship is because that is both exciting and sort of like adrenaline inducing. It's like, is this relationship going to work out? Versus the sort of domestic nature of committed relationships is it requires you to really believe in that relationship, which is kind of a high bar, I would say, because I think it's pretty easy to convince a reader that like a person should be with this new exciting thing versus this person should continue to be part of this relationship where they grow and they're their best selves. And I think that would be the thing you'd have to keep in mind, is that the audience has to root for the relationship. They have to want the relationship to last, and in more than just a shipping way. They have to want the relationship to last in that the protagonist or the narrator or whoever is made better by that relationship. And you want that to be reinforced as often as possible. So I think that one of the problems I see occasionally, or one of the things that I try not to do, because again, I haven't been doing this very long. I would not call myself an expert in writing long-term relationships. But one of the things I try to do is really show those moments of intimacy that these people have grown together, and here's proof. Here is just a simple moment of the two of them communicating, and you can feel the way that there's intimacy here, that there is maturity here, and that if they were having this conversation with anybody else, it wouldn't have this outcome of like satisfaction or completion, or this feeling that like, yes, we've made progress, we've taken steps forward. The plot has moved forward purely as a result of these two characters having this conversation and proving that this relationship is based on something. It's rooted in something very real and very strong. And I think, and how do you do that? I mean, I do occasionally call back to earlier scenes where they handle things differently, or, you know, we'll address something from the beginning of their relationship and they'll reflect how that feels different now, or how we no longer have these concerns. But yeah, you want to make sure for sure that the conflict is different. That I think if you want people to believe in the relationship, then you want the conflict to not be between them, but how do they kind of get on the same side and face some external conflict. But you asked specifically about a relationship that spans years. I mean, you would have to, as always, this is about characterization, so you really want to make sure that the characters themselves feel different. They feel like they have grown. I'm really just making the same point over and over again, which is that you want to, and again, this is something I aim for versus something I think I've gotten right, because I don't think I've been doing it long enough to know if I've gotten it right. But some sensation that you're dealing with a person who has evolved, and they're not having the same reactions in chapter 40 that they had in chapter 5. You know, that just, they should seem like someone who has learned. And ideally, if it's about a relationship, someone who can rely on their partner and is no longer having the same, you know, communication issues or the same self-doubt. And now they have someone who like actually continues to move them forward. I think that's probably enough for today. I have a couple of other sort of older writing things that I answered very quickly that we can talk about if you want to. Alone with You in the Ether is available. If I don't sound enthusiastic about it, it's only because I know that it's so personal. I feel really vulnerable putting this out there because naturally when you put out a book, I can't control how people react to it. I can't control how they're going to perceive the story that I've told. It's now out of my hands, and that feels especially scary now. This book, it's not about me or anybody in my life. Nobody real is in this book. But at the same time, my experience is in this book. My most vulnerable moments are in this book. Really, so much so that I wrote this over a year and a half ago, I think. And, you know, I was thinking about it long. It's been like 2 years of this story kind of floating around. And as I was editing it, you know, I hadn't touched it for about a year. And then as I was going through and editing it, I had these insane, like, really strong moments of being back in my old self and being back there in that and just more difficult and more, I keep saying vulnerable, but more vulnerable times of my life. And as I was editing, I just kept thinking like, oh my God, like I've come so far. And not even in a writing way, although I hope that's the case. I definitely did have to rework some scenes that I felt like it just didn't sound like my voice, like my current voice. It sounded like an older version of me trying to sound like something. But yeah, so yes, I'm very nervous. Because it's so personal, because the experience is so, you know, it's scary to be honest. And of course, as I said, these are my truths. So I am aware that there are going to be people who, whatever, take issue with things, or they don't relate to the characters, or they don't relate to these problems, or they don't agree with the actions that these characters take, which is fine. A lot of their actions are unreasonable for what I like to think are good reason, characterization-wise. Anyway, I'm babbling. I do think it contains some of my best writing. Part 4 and Part 5 in particular are like, one thing about this book, I will say, is it kind of has intentionally different atmospheres. So, you know, how it feels in the beginning of the book is very different from how it feels in the middle of the book. And I think there is some level of actually feeling the way that things amplify as you get further into the story, and the shades of it the shades of emotion, I think, might change from part to part. So yeah, I don't know why I'm like warning you. I feel very strongly about this book. Mr. Blake likes it. So this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next week.